Call the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of November 17th, 2021 to order at 7 p.m. The Planning and Zoning Commission is an independent advisory body of the City of Ames City Council. The Planning and Zoning Commissions are volunteers of the community and not part of the city administration. The commission is responsible for the preparation and adoption of official comprehensive plan of the city and gives advice and recommendations on matters involving amendments to the zoning ordinance and the historic preservation ordinance and guidelines, subdivision, annexations, master plans, and major site development plans and developments within the Ames urban fringe areas. As an advisory commission, we welcome all comments and questions. We make our recommendations based on codes, the facts presented, the input from the public. If any of the proceedings become lengthy, we may ask that comments be focused on new information not previously presented. You may speak only once on an agenda item. If you wish to speak, please fill out the speaker information cards. They're on the podium and present it to the recording secretary. We ask that you come to the microphone to speak so that all comments may be recorded. Please state your name and address for the record prior to making any comments. The order of proceeding for each agenda item. Each item on the agenda will be as follows. City staff will present the staff report regarding the agenda item. Commission members will have the opportunity to ask questions of city staff. The applicant would be invited to make a statement regarding the request. Commission members will have an opportunity to ask questions of the applicant. Members of the audience will be invited to come forward to offer comments and questions. Once the public comment is closed, city staff and the applicant will have an opportunity for concluding remarks. The commission will discuss application based on all presentations, and any comments given based on all presentations and any comments given and come to a recommendation for the city council. The discussion may include further questions to city staff and the applicant for clarification. With that, we move on to the agenda. Introduction of commission members.
Mike Clayton.
Doug Regaller.
John Emery.
Ruth Holstrom. Anpreet Minhas.
Okay. Approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
I'd move to approve the minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay.
Did we approve the agenda or?
I know. I
Oh, the
thought we were
agenda.
saying agenda, not minutes.
Excuse me?
Whoops.
I didn't hear.
Oh, no.
I think it was a motion to
That was
move,
the agenda.
approve
Oh,
the
that
agenda.
was an aye, sorry.
Okay.
Do you want to do it again? One more time?
Yeah.
What? I didn't hear what you said at all.
Can we do it one more time? I think she mentioned approval of minutes
Yeah,
instead of
that-
agenda.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Approval of the agenda. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? I did it wrong again, didn't I? I asked for a motion to approve the agenda.
You didn't ask for a motion, you said approve it.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the agenda?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay. So approved. Okay, approval of the minutes of the November 3rd, 2021 meeting.
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, nay. So approved. Okay, the public forum. This is for items that are not on the agenda tonight. Do we have anything from the public? Hearing none, we'll move forward to item number 5. Rezoning of an existing development to a planned unit development overlay in order to allow for household living uses in lieu of senior living uses at 3709 Tripp Street and the property at 3803, 3807, 3811, 3815, 3819, 3905, 3911, and 39 17 Tripp Street. City?
Okay, I'm Ray Anderson, one of the planners in the office. Probably haven't seen me for a while.
I've never seen it.
Okay, this is a rezoning proposal. I won't go through all the addresses again, but it's rezoning from the suburban residential medium density zone to suburban residential medium density zone with a planned unit development overlay. And there are two sites. One is the 3709 Tripp Street, which has a 61 unit building on the site that back in 2002 was approved for use as an independent senior living facility by the Zoning Board of Adjustment. And the other site to the west is, and each one is a separate lot. So the other lot has 7 12-unit apartment buildings and a community building. And each of those apartment buildings has a separate address, which is why we have all those addresses there. And that was approved by the city council through a major site development plan back in 2002. And the property was sold about a year ago, a little more than that. And the new owner would like to use the 61 unit senior living facility as an apartment dwelling. And in the FSRM zone, the current zoning, it allows a maximum number of units per apartment dwelling, which is 12. You can have no more than 12. And so they want to use it as an apartment dwelling. That's not allowed under the current zoning. However, with the planned unit development overlay, it's possible to use that building then as an apartment dwelling. They are proposing that all of the units would be affordable housing for a minimum of 30 years. And affordable housing means for occupancy by households making 60% or less of area median income as established by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development and in conformance with the federal low-income housing tax credit requirements. So they're based on their financing, they would be required to provide those units as the affordable housing. And with the overlay, it would be required that they have those units as affordable housing as well, low to moderate income housing. And that a separate zoning agreement would be signed and would be in effect to maintain those units as affordable units for 30 years. They are including both sites as a planned unit development. And a reason for that is that the off-street parking requirements, there's a minimum number of parking spaces required. Under the current zoning, they're required to have 1.5 parking spaces for each one-bedroom unit and 1 parking space for each bedroom for units of 2 bedrooms or more. And they don't have enough existing parking to meet that zoning requirement, but under the PUD with the affordable housing units, they're allowed to have just 2 parking spaces for the 3-bedroom units, not 3 parking spaces. So that would be a reduction of, in this case, 36 parking spaces because there are 36 units with 3 bedrooms or more. And as it so happens, the number of existing parking spaces is exactly what they need for that reduced number of parking spaces would be required, that reduction of 36. So they need 276 spaces, and that's exactly what they have. So they are requesting this rezoning, as I mentioned, for the use of that 61 unit building as apartments, as an apartment dwelling. And they also request the rezoning to qualify for that reduction of off-street parking spaces. But they are required to have that affordable housing agreement that would be part of the rezoning. It would be a contract rezoning, as we would call it, so that the rezoning would include that agreement that they would sign. They did go to the Zoning Board of Adjustment first and applied for a use variance. That was not approved. It was determined that they did not meet the criteria for that. And so now they're requesting the rezoning so that they can use that 61 unit building as an apartment dwelling. We recommend approval as staff with that condition that contract rezoning be part of the approval. That's about all I have at this time. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. And the applicant is here as well to answer any questions you might have.
The L-shaped one, upside down L-shaped.
Yes.
Is the only 55?
That's, yeah, independent senior living has a requirement that age limit of 55 or older.
Only in that upside
Only
down?
in that building, yeah.
The other ones
but-
don't have that.
But what they want to do, there'd be no age restriction in any of the buildings, including the 61 unit building. It would no longer be independent senior housing. It would be apartment units just like the other 7 buildings.
So I have a clarification question.
Okay.
Has this whole area been under previous management? Have it always been kind of connected, or were they owned by like different people? Like, do you understand, like the L-shaped one, the senior living, was that always part of the other 12 units?
They're on separate properties
Yeah.
and they had separate approvals, and, you know, they have separate uses that
Yeah.
were approved for
Mhm.
those buildings, but I believe they're owned by the same property owner.
And have they historically been owned by the same property owner?
Weren't they developed by the same person?
I think so.
I
It's
think
like-
they were.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
they're 2 separate permits, but the same applicant
Yeah.
for both,
Gotcha.
is what I recall from our prior stuff.
So when they talk about like the 91% occupancy over like the last 15 years, and that there hasn't been a problem with any of the codes, no code violations, is that because they have the 12 units that are able to be multifamily, and then the senior living always stayed senior living?
So what exactly are you referencing with that quote that you just made?
The 91%?
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is, something in there. So.
90.4.
Oh, 90.4, sorry, 90.4%. Where is that on there?
Oh, was that from that market study they
I
did?
think that's
Yeah,
from the
that's
Yeah.
market study, not
Yeah.
the.
Oh, okay.
thing.
Okay, yes, from the market study on the second page. So that was occupancy for the senior living facility. And if, okay, so that answers kind of my question. I was just misreading it.
I guess I'm gonna restate the situation.
Please.
The TWG, who's the current owner, has owned the property for just over a year, I believe.
Mhm.
They have not operated as a senior living facility. The prior developer has not, for the majority or maybe even all of the time period that it's been built, operated as a senior living facility, as it's been discussed or disclosed to us. We do not have an inspection program that verifies occupancy.
Mhm.
So the city of Ames never cited them for not operating it as senior living. but they have disclosed it in their estimation. It's never been. It's possible it was originally for a couple of years. That's not clear either. They have an agreement with IFA, Iowa Finance Authority, to be low-income housing. The city of Ames never signed that agreement, so we were never a party to how that was being done with IFA. And all of this has come up because TWG acquired the property. They knew what they acquired, but they're trying to go down a path to get to authorization to operate it as this one household living use, regardless of how it was approved in the past, and kind of trying to move past that it was not probably operated consistent with city codes in the past. If this is approved, none of that matters. If it's not approved, then I'm not sure what the next step will be for TWG. Does that help?
That
kind of-
absolutely answers the question that I asked very unclearly.
Okay.
So the only piece of this property that was out of compliance was the L shape.
So 3709, because we view it as,
Mhm.
this is also a discrepancy. We view it as a totally separate property and a totally separate project. 3709 is the only one that's required to be senior housing by its permit. And they look at it as that red outline as one combined site for their agreement with IFA on how to run the site and administer the site.
And the agreement with IFA, or however you say it, states what?
I don't know. I haven't ever read it because I didn't have to sign it.
Oh,
The applicant can speak to that. Essentially, they have to provide affordable housing, but there's no age restriction in it.
Is there a percentage that is required for that? Or
Let the applicant speak to their agreement. We're just not part of it, so I can't really knowledgeably speak to it.
That's fine.
Their proposal tonight is to re-up the site in the affordable housing program at 100% of the units.
Okay, you mentioned that that there are 276 parking spaces. I assume that's in both lots 1 and 2 together.
Yes.
Okay, say 10, 15 years from now, the owner wants to sell off lot 2, for example. Well, would the current owner then would they be required to put in more parking in lot 1? Because there's really not a whole lot of space there.
They would become non-conforming if they
So not
pull up one. And
So not necessarily. So we did talk about this. This is the first PUD we've done.
Mhm.
So exactly how it is being permitted as one site regardless of ownership.
Okay,
So in our eyes, it is whatever the parking number that Ray quoted is available to everybody on either property regardless of ownership. That is how this would play out from the way the PUD is proposed tonight.
okay.
But
Yeah.
with no parking agreement, that would be implemented, even if the current ownership is, the same. If for some reason those two lots, like ownership changed of one or the other, technically lot 1 wouldn't have the right necessarily to use the parking from lot 2, correct?
From the city of Ames's perspective, they do. What they have as a property right, we would not be involved in. So for city code compliance, we would say you can park anywhere on these two properties. We will give you a letter of compliance for your apartment meeting code requirements because the PUD says you can park anywhere.
But
We
the
could-
individuals, if they sold it, could say, no, you cannot. People at 3709 cannot park on the other properties.
Possibly. If it's inconsistent with the city approval, I'm not sure where that would end up, but conceivably that's true. Alternatively, a shared parking agreement could be required and recorded against the property to make that clear that that's the expectation. That is not a condition we put in front of you tonight, but that's something that could be done.
And I'm just curious about this. So since you're talking about parking, it says that there's parking allowed on the north side of Tripp Street. And I'm wondering, on the street. And if you're now going to have this be all like affordable housing, are you going to have an increased number of cars? Because yes, you're going to meet the zoning requirements by having just the right amount of parking spaces on the lot, but you're still going to have 3-bedroom, 3-bedroom units. And so would you then increase the parking, or would that pretty much stay stable? Or is that a question for the owner?
So I think there's a lot of little pieces to that question.
Sorry.
I'll try to pick it apart. So by code,
Mhm.
we as the city of Ames are saying that when you provide affordable housing, we only expect, regardless of what might happen on the street, we only expect 2 spaces for 3-bedroom units.
Gotcha.
That's city expectation.
Uh-huh.
The other part of that would be based on prior property owners' operations and the last year of operation by TWG. They haven't been filling it with senior housing. It's just been regular household living.
Mhm.
So how it has been operating versus how it's being proposed to be approved should be no change in existing conditions. And if someone came to tonight and said this is a parking problem and we've seen this for 10 years, that'd be information for you. If someone offers that, I don't have anything that says there's a parking problem on Tripp Street that would negate the city's standard for reducing parking for 3-bedroom units. And our perspective for doing that, this is again new. We did this summer when we adopted this overlay. Our perspective is affordable housing. If you're going to build bigger units for families, the likelihood of needing 3 cars compared to student housing is very, very low. So we thought it was fair to try to promote affordable housing and reduce that extra parking requirement when the units are able to be occupied or intended to be occupied by lower income households or family units instead of student housing.
Thank you. That was also a clarification I was wondering about, is if students would be living there.
So I didn't answer that question.
I will ask that question.
Okay.
There's nothing that would prevent them from renting to students as long as they
I will let the applicant explain what the LIHTC program definition of a household is.
Okay.
but we can't control once we, how do I want to put this? City of Ames can't control who they rent to. Other than currently that's supposed to be 55 plus.
Correct, but that's there's a specific carve out for senior housing under the Fair Housing Act for housing for older persons called HOPA. So we're federally allowed to exclude everybody that's not a senior citizen in certain circumstances. Normally you can't even do that, but there is a specific carve out under HOPA for senior citizens. We have not, to my knowledge, ever said a student is not allowed to live in an apartment building anywhere in the city.
Because we can't, because of the state changed that.
I didn't say that. I'm saying I'm not familiar with the city ever having restricted occupancy based on you being a student or not. Being a student is not a protected class. I will also say that, but we have never put that limitation on anybody's property.
But there would be, just based on the application, that for them to have the lower income and basically to have affordable housing, they do have to meet requirements for other agencies, correct?
They do. They have to meet all the definitions that the IRS has to be able to be eligible for the tax credits, and the oversight is through IFA, and TWG can talk to what those things are at probably a little bit higher level than I can. I have a working knowledge of it, but I don't administer those programs.
Thank you for all the clarification.
I had a few questions to Ray, Kelly, whoever wants to. Can you give me some context on what the existing zoning? The existing zoning is RM, FSRM. And the 61 unit apartment was approved only because it's a senior housing, only under that definition.
Correct.
Was that approved under some kind of a federal or state program, or was it just a zoning requirement or a zoning condition by the city?
It's a definition in our zoning ordinance. So you can choose to apply for that use, go to the zoning board of adjustment and ask for a special use permit as an independent senior living facility. And then our code defines what that is to be eligible for that. So we have a few across the city. The two most, North Crested. So the two that took advantage of that in the last 5 years would be the Village Co-op down south off of Cedar Lane and Bobcat. And then up north at 190th and Hyde, you have the Vintage Co-op. Both of those buildings are in FSRM zoning and have 50 plus units in them because they're restricted to independent senior living. There's others across the city, but those are the other two I know that are in the same zoning district and have had special use permits approved.
But we do not have any zoning enforcement mechanism in place
We do not have a proactive zoning enforcement mechanism.
to identify whether they are actually being used for senior housing
Right.
or not.
So our rental inspections program does not inquire about who the occupant of an apartment is. It's a review of the condition of the property and the apartment unit, not who the tenants are.
To me, that's a big loophole right there that we need to address, not for now, but I think the reason I say that as a loophole is because it's a lack of enforcement that, from what I'm understanding from the staff report and what's been identified by the applicant, is that this apartment complex, which the city approved for more than the 12 units that are typically allowed in the zone, was approved because it was identified as an independent senior living. That has not been operating as one, but instead has been rented to all age groups. To me, that is an enforcement issue that has led to this situation where you have an apartment unit now that's not following what it was approved for. That is one. Two, I do like the idea of the LIHTC, using LIHTC credits to make this more affordable. So that's a fantastic idea in general, and I'm totally supportive of that. But to me, then the next question is, would there be some kind of an enforcement mechanism to make sure that those stay low income or are only offered to that 60% median AMI for the next 30 years? What is going to be our plan to ensure that that actually happens? And if we don't have that, do we then create one more sort of enforcement issue in the future?
So alternative one has a condition on it that we enter into a contract rezoning agreement, which the city council would review. The way that's drafted right now, they have to provide annually to the city of Ames information that corresponds to them renting to households that meet the definition of 60% of AMI or less, essentially giving us the same information they have to give the state.
So that's an annual, you said, reporting?
It's an annual, the condition in the draft contract would be annually have to provide that information to the city, saying that to demonstrate that they are doing what they're obligated to do. And if they did not do that, it would then be a violation of the zoning code and be a municipal infraction. Just again, we don't have the proactive. If someone came to the city and said, hey, I'm a senior, and this was supposed to be senior housing and it's not being operated that way, we would have investigated as a zoning enforcement issue. We have tools to do that, but we're not proactive on that. So it's reactive. It's reactive, yes.
Okay. So then my next question, which should have been my first question, is at this point, there are 61 units at least that are supposed to be senior housing. Whether they are being used for that or not, that's a secondary thing. But given that loss of 61 units of senior housing, do we have a plan to make up for that loss elsewhere?
So that's one reason why we included their market study assessment that they used for the variance application. So I'm going to look at it two different ways. So TWG tried to argue that there's a more compelling need for affordable housing versus senior housing. And that's their argument to make. I'm not really going to say one way or the other about their interest. I will say that the city of Ames, when we do our consolidated housing plan, which is updated every 5 years, senior housing is not identified as a great need. We view affordable housing as a higher need, just as a city policy perspective as well. And our housing coordinator has not ever said that we need to pursue senior housing as a market niche that needs to be addressed from an affordability perspective. So we don't have plans to support, incentivize, promote any additional senior housing. It's being built in the market, which is what their market study is saying. It's clearly at the high end, not at the entry level, but that's how the market's reacting to the need.
Okay. So would it be then safe to say that based on the other initiatives and work that the city has done, like you mentioned, the other CDBG related work and stuff, would it be safe to say that this loss of 61 units will not create or exacerbate an issue with senior housing
So
needs?
yeah, I would say uniquely because they're telling us it's never been used that way. We're not displacing 60 seniors tomorrow that have nowhere to go. So their market study is saying there's not waiting lists at other units. So if someone wanted to come in and take an affordable unit or a senior unit at any of these other facilities, they could get in now. There's not waiting lists. We're not really taking 60 units away from the market for it. That's what their market study is saying.
Is that, so the market study says
That's my
the primary
interpretation.
market area, are we talking about just these two lots and the units in
No,
these two lots, or is it a
Did we
bigger area?
attach it to the report? Did we just quote it?
It's not included.
Market study. So the market
It's in the
study,
report,
we just quoted it, right?
but
didn't
we just
attach
quoted, yeah. We didn't
Do you have it
attach
with
it.
you?
Which is fine. I
Do you
don't
have
need
it
to
with
see
you?
the report. I'm just
It-
curious
it-
if it's
The
just
market
these
area
two.
was Ames.
Okay,
So
the
they
entire
looked
Ames.
at the other senior housing apartments that are in the city and identified if there was waiting lists and what their occupancy levels were. So
Okay.
it was not just this property. It was a couple other ones out in the southwest and to the north.
So the L-shaped building, it's supposed to, right now, it's supposed to be affordable senior living?
Nope, just senior living.
Just
There's
senior.
no affordability requirement on any of the properties when they were approved. That was a voluntary choice of the original developer to pursue LIHTC funding to build the project. It was not a city condition.
But part of the LIHTC funding was that, I'll ask the applicant.
Okay.
You don't know
I probably don't know, and it was 15 years ago.
when you were young.
That doesn't have anything to do with me being young. It has to be with none of us in this room or involved in the situation.
I understand.
So Kelly, out of curiosity then, so the senior living facility, did they receive some sort of credits in order to build that facility specifically for?
I'll let TW, no, not for seniors.
It got the increased allowance for units.
So
You could-
city approval to build an independent senior living facility with no limitations or expectations on income. The developer voluntarily chose to pursue a low income housing tax credit project that included that building, but there's no senior expectation in it.
Okay, no, I understand that. I'm just curious based on the letter we received from the individual that had some concerns and was opposed, I guess, to the rezoning based upon the perception that thousands of dollars of taxpayer money went into building this senior only facility. So I guess I'm just trying to reconcile whether or not there's any validity to that or any truth to that, or if, I guess, that opposition
So
is.
I'm not 100. So the letter you're referring to from Mr. Holland, I'm not 100% sure that they understand that the proposal is to continue this as affordable housing for 30 more years.
Okay.
Or because if you just read the legal notice, which is what your agenda title is, it says we're changing from senior living to household living. It doesn't say and to continue as affordable housing for 30 years because that's not part of the zoning issue directly. So
Okay.
But
I
you're
don't
just-
know
you're
what to
just
read
stating
into
what
that.
you,
I don't
your
know what,
interpretation.
I don't know what to read into the letter about the objection related to its initial funding
Okay.
and the change of use now.
Right, and
I mean, that's up for your interpretation.
Right. And obviously you just received it and passed it on to
Yep.
us. There's been no ability to respond and, provide any sort of additional information.
Yep.
So,
But that's-
Okay.
That's a good question.
That's what I was-
Ruth, though. So just to be clear, there's been no city financial investment in the original senior housing. That's
it's all developed.
No incentives at the
No.
time. they-
Not that I know of.
You would-
Vanessa's never told me that we put money into this. I think it's all from the low income housing tax credit program.
You would
But
think
the
that,
only advantage in that situation that the original developer did get was to construct an apartment building that had 61 units and not 12 units, that is allowed by FSRN.
Correct.
And the special use permit, right? They received
Yeah.
for the,
So the special use permit allowed for the 61 unit building versus a complex of 12 unit buildings. I mean, you can see the distinction, right? I mean, it's the best
And-
comparison in town.
And they also received a consideration on the parking at the time.
So senior living only requires one parking space per unit, regardless of the number of bedrooms. So that's just built into the definition of being an independent senior living facility.
So that was built into that L-shaped or 7.
Yeah. So the 3709 site met code completely. No variances, no deviations were granted. It was all approved through a special use permit. And the same with the other site, no deviations, no variances were granted. It was approved as a major site plan compliant with zoning ordinance. It's the distinction of not using it for senior living, which causes the consideration of deviating from code for the size of the building. It's not a use question, it's the size of a building question, which is
And
a little
the
awkward.
Parking.
Yeah, and parking, except for if we weren't doing affordable housing, you couldn't consider this. It wouldn't meet code. It's unapprovable. It's only because it's affordable housing can you reduce the parking by 36 spaces. So if anybody else walked in and said, I wanted to do a PUD to do this, wouldn't work.
So the guys across the street couldn't ask for the same thing.
Well, there's a lot of reasons why, but right. They don't have 2 acres. They're already parked as household living. None of that would be relevant. There's no senior housing across the street.
Correct, but they can't ask for the same variance. What this
There's
is
no variance.
or variance. They couldn't ask for the same consideration is what this property is asking.
They wouldn't need to in the first place because it's already built at the higher parking rate because it has household living in all of those buildings.
Okay.
It's only the change from senior living to something else that causes an issue.
And that would be where she's coming up with for future, that could have been the loophole to be able to, at the beginning, you have to, because it was built for senior living and not used for senior living, they were able to have fewer parking spots originally.
Not because that's what they did, right? Like,
I meant the requirement is that they could have just one parking spot per unit.
for senior living, correct?
Yes.
I think given what we are looking at right now, to me, and I still need to hear from the applicant, but it's basically, it was approved as a independent senior living, which allowed them that intensity in the number of units in one apartment building. The fact, or if it's, I don't know if it's a fact or not, the information that we have that it was not being used for that, I think that's sort of in the past now. We need to figure out what is happening today and what is the best way to move forward. So to me, this proposal looks like an interesting option to explore. So I think we should probably give an opportunity to the applicant to come in and answer some questions.
Yeah.
Like, you have a couple
So if
for
I
the
could,
applicant too.
so I'll clarify our recommendation. Our view is we support the PUD because we find value in the 30-year commitment to affordable housing across both of these sites. And as the question came up, and we're willing to say that this building is not necessary to meet our housing demands for seniors.
Right.
That's really the
Mhm.
basis of staff's recommendation.
That makes sense.
But as an alternative, you don't have a number 4 saying no change.
Don't have it in front of me. I don't remember what they say. I mean, you can always recommend denial.
There is a number 3 which says no.
Number 2 has a,
yeah, you can deny.
Denial is no change.
but alternative number 2,
If you deny it, there's no change in the zoning.
Yeah, then things just continue the way they are right
Okay.
now.
will not continue the same way.
They will need to be established as previously approved. Yes. We're all on the same page. It's not operating as approved. So if this is denied, other actions will have to occur
Okay.
to bring it
Okay,
into
so number
compliance.
2 is a denial.
Mhm.
It says, yeah, you may recommend deny the request. So,
Okay.
Do we want to have the?
Okay, any more questions for the staff at this time?
Not right now.
Okay, at this time, the applicant will be invited to make a statement regarding the request.
yeah, please.
Hi, I'm Bridget Hiltz with TWG Development. The address is 1301 East Washington Street, Suite 100, Indianapolis, Indiana, 46202. That's the TWG address. Hopefully I put that right. Forgive me, I'm a little nervous. This is my first in-person hearing. But we acquired Windsor Point and Brighton. Brighton is the L-shaped building. End of October of 2020. And from our understanding, we were excited. We acquired this. It was able to be put back into the low-income housing tax credit program. So we decided to purchase it, reapply to Iowa Finance Authority, and rehab the building. When we had our team go out, we have a due diligence process where we get phase 1, capital needs assessment, all these things to see before we buy it. And we're like, wow, this is great. We can, rehab these buildings, make them nice. When we went through our application, there's this 7B letter that states, is this zoned correctly? And that's when we were like, well, it's not. This L-shaped building, the property management company before us, and they were the developers and owners of that for 15 plus years. They're like, no, in 2003, we asked IFA, we submitted the whole thing as one application, but the 61 building would be the senior building. We couldn't fill it up. So we asked IFA if we could reduce our tax credits, but put a general population on it. But that also then reduced the affordability on that building, so the whole building was not an affordable housing building at that time then. So our plan was to put it back into the tax credit program. It was out of their year 15 compliance with IFA. So we reapplied, and we're just waiting on this last piece of the puzzle, because we don't want to displace 61 families, obviously. That's our biggest challenge with this. And so we want to, and if it's denied, how to move forward. So we're trying everything we can to make sure we're in compliance with you all. So we went the variance route, denied that. So we are here today, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are you currently operating as if you're are you currently operating as like an affordable housing unit at this point, or are you having higher prices?
It is all still affordable.
Okay.
We are still following. So for IFA, it's the first 15 years is through IFA, and then there's an extended use period, and it's an additional 15 years. So we are still following that. We are, with our application we've submitted, it is 100% affordable at 60% AMI.
Can you help us with the figure, what that 60% AMI comes for Ames area?
If I could get my
That's-
computer, I can look it
I
up.
can answer that later. We have it on our
Okay.
website if you want.
Okay, that's okay.
It
'Cause I'm
depends on,
trying to-
it
what
all
I'm-
varies depending on household size, so it's a different income depending on household size.
Because the reason I'm asking for that is just to understand what the rent range might look like when you're talking about a 60%, renting it to 60% EMI. That's kind of where I'm going with this.
Yes, and so we follow strict compliance with IFA and the Section 42. So the IRS determines what rent limits are, and we cannot go above those with our 60% affordability.
Could you also help me? And I'm vaguely, very briefly familiar with the LIHTC program, but not much. Do you have an option or a combination in the LIHTC program where you could use or have that L-shaped building, the apartment building, to be senior housing and the rest of it to be open to everyone? Or is that doesn't, you cannot mix that up?
We asked, so IFA came to us, and this was the last little piece of the puzzle. So we asked, could we switch it back? Due to how the previous from what IFA told us, due to how the previous developer put in their LURA, which is the land use restriction agreement with them, they told us we could not go back on that. And there was a HOPA, different law, things that they told us to steer clear of.
I am not sure I completely understand it, but okay.
I had some other questions, just to kind of get an idea of what you guys are trying to do. I saw that you were looking at having balcony spaces and more like green space that didn't include the lagoon area. So that means that you're not trying to change that at all, correct?
Yeah, so we are not changing the buildings at all. It's a like for like rehab. So it's mechanicals, flooring, cabinetry, roofing. IFA does we'll have to put higher siding of what they want around the building, but it'll be a like for like. We're not going to take out balconies, put balconies in.
Yeah, I just meant like you said that you were gonna have like, I'm sorry, I'm just gonna hear, but like just more like green space around and like a playground. Is that already there?
Yeah,
Or
Yep, it's already there. So we have a playground, and there's like a little barbecue area. Then we have fitness centers, laundry room, and a clubhouse and business center rooms.
Okay, so that's already in existence.
Yes.
And basically what you're looking at doing is like a renovation that just kind of brings it up to date, but you're not going to change any structural things with or the landscape architecture of the area.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Does your company primarily deal with lower moderate income housing, or is this something new for you?
We do. We've been around since 2007. We started out with just LIHTC. We do have a market rate arm, but that's probably 20% of our business. So the rest is LIHTC. And a small portion of that is these acquisition rehabs to keep building apartments like this that fall out of the program to keep them affordable for longer periods of time.
Can you address how someone is eligible essentially for the these particular units? Again, it was kind of mentioned, we have a pretty heavy student population. So in terms of affordability and how to balance that.
Absolutely. So the Section 42 program has very strict compliance. We have a really big in-house compliance team at our office. And then all of our property managers and leasing managers have to follow strict guidelines of how to, when an applicant comes in, all the questions that we have to ask and what they have to provide for us. So you have to prove that you are within the 60% median income. there's a lot of stuff that they have to check, and forgive me, I don't know everything that they have to check because it is a big list. And sometimes I get IRS confused with what HUD wants, and I know student living is the one that I can't remember which one they don't allow. But this is not, we won't have HUD funding on this, so we don't have that. But I can definitely get that information for you all.
Okay, so with one of the two, whether it's HUD or through IFA,
Mhm.
they require them to state whether or not they're a student or not.
Yes. Yeah.
I see.
I'll add a little bit because we're doing a LIHTC. Hopefully we're doing a LIHTC project down the street. And so again, I'm not an expert. The way I would phrase this is full-time students, if that is all they are not eligible. However, that does not mean a household member cannot be a student. Does that help define some distinction there? So 4 full-time students will not qualify. If the primary householder is a student and they meet the other definitions with the other household members, they can be a student. Or another household member, even if the primary household holder is not a student, doesn't mean someone else in the household can't be a student. So there's a subtle line there between being all students and someone being a student in that household. That's how it's explained to us by the developer we're partnering with down the street on State.
So it's more family kind of focused. So you have to have some kind of other relationship versus you all go to the same school or something.
So again, level of my knowledge stops there.
Okay.
How the IRS, how IFA says that they did the right qualifications to verify that they're not full-time students only. Because the point isn't to subsidize. It's not meant to be student housing. No one's using federal housing money to try to create dorms or to do student housing. That's not the
Although you have
purpose.
Students that have families, and this might be, another option to house them.
So that's what I'm trying to say is it's not that no student can live there.
Mhm.
It's just that you can't just be a full-time student. There's distinctions there.
That is an interesting.
When you bought this property, you knew that was supposed to be a 55 plus?
We got the zoning letter and we took it to the previous owner and they said that they've been running it as general occupancy since 2003. And here was that IFA approved it. So
When you bought the place, you knew that it was supposed to be 55 plus?
I would say no, because we got the zoning letter. And that is something that we have now added more information onto our due diligence list because we got the zoning letter and it stated all of that. But then we were also getting their documents with their covenants that were recorded and their deeds that were recorded saying that it was for general
And then
occupancy.
you've owned this property for a year.
Yes.
Have you moved in anybody that is not 55 plus into that building since?
I do not know. I'm not part of our property management team. And so I'm not sure what they have been doing.
Do you have any idea what the percentage of seniors that do live in the senior only facility is?
I do not have that information. We can definitely get that. I can have our compliance team pull that information if needed.
I had one more question. I might have already asked this, so I apologize. But what percentage of the housing, I think you answered this, needs to be low, qualify for the affordable housing? And you're saying it would be 100%, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Just didn't write down my answer. Thank you.
One more question on the rent side. Do you know, or can you help us figure out what the existing rent range is today? How would that change once you move to the LIHTC model?
Once we close on the property and begin renovations, so there's kind of this renovations are usually 12 to 15 months, and it's all on site. So what we do is we move the household into what we call a hotel unit on site, and they're there for about 4 to 5 days, and then they move back into their apartment that's all renovated. So They, forgive me, now I forgot your question.
I'm trying to understand what the rent range today is and how that
Okay.
might change once you move to a lighted model. Would it increase, decrease? Where might that go?
Gotcha. So there's this 12. So what we do is we follow the IRS guidelines, and they release those every year. So I don't know when they release the rents, but we follow those guidelines. So there shouldn't be.
But they won't change at all because they're in a compliance period from the last tax credits
Okay.
that they
Yeah.
received.
Okay.
So it doesn't, there's no change tomorrow if this is approved.
Okay.
It
The
perpetuates,
same
Yes.
guidelines
it
are
perpetuates
applicable
what
right
it
now.
is. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it extends that requirement.
Okay.
rather
It
than
doesn't
changing it.
become expensive or it doesn't really decrease. It's sort of similar to what
Be-
it is
because
in
of the
same contract.
situation
Yep.
they've been operating under, there's no change.
Got it. That's all I have. Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you,
Oh.
ma'am.
Thank you.
Yeah.
At this time, I ask for members of the audience to come forward and offer comments and questions, if there are any. Okay, the public comment section is now closed. City staff and applicant will have an opportunity for concluding remarks. Do you have any concluding remarks, ma'am?
Well, I appreciate you guys all meeting with me today. I'm very excited to be here. I really hope this PUD process works. We've had such great success in LIHTC and seeing these people who need, I mean, I personally have bought a house in the past 3 years, and these crazy house prices, it's hard. And so we want to keep these affordable. We want to keep the people who are living there, living there. We have a person who's lived there 10 years. And it helps, knowing these people and seeing these people really helps me love what I do. And so I really hope that we can get this portion or get this PUD and we can spruce up their living facilities to safe sanitary housing, because that's what TWG does and that's what we stand for. So thank you so much for letting me be here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Staff?
So I did look up the 60% AMI table. I think someone asked for that. So the max income level for a household in 2021, a one-person household is 37,800. I'm just going to give you a sample. A three-person household is 48,600. So that's 60% of average median income. They don't tell you median income, so you have to back into the math on that. But if you go to 80% AMI, it's almost 30% higher than that just to get to 80% high. So you go to 50,400 for a one-person household at 80%, 71,590 for a three-person household. So the 60%, when this is basically what federal programming will target, this would be our perspective too. If it's not 60% AMI, you're really not getting into the affordability need of a community. 80%. We wouldn't be here supporting this if we were talking about 80% AMI. 60% is where we start to get interested from a housing perspective in my department.
Any more
So
staff comments?
Oh, nothing.
I did
Okay.
have a quick couple questions for staff, if that's okay.
Sure.
Would it be fair to say that this rezoning might result in intensification of use on the site?
No.
I didn't hear what you said.
I mean, the units are going to be, she asked if it intensify use of the site. You could probably look at that a couple different ways. In my eyes, no. The number of dwelling units is going to be the same. The number of bedrooms is going to be the same. So for my eyes, that the normal intensity measures that we would use, the answer would be no.
But now by right, a 3-bedroom unit could be not just a family, but students or whoever. So the number of cars might increase as opposed to a senior household or a single senior person living.
But are you sure that a 2-bedroom senior unit doesn't have 2 cars?
I don't know.
Because we only
I
require
don't know.
1. So that,
Yeah.
I mean, those are the questions I can't
Sure.
answer. On parking intensity, I don't know.
The second one was more of, we are, the second item on the agenda, we're talking about the PUD changes.
Mhm.
Can you talk about how, if we approve that today, later, I know it's later in the agenda, but what might that impact be on this one?
There's two parts to your next agenda item. One is a proposal to add commercial as an
Right.
option.
Right,
The second part is to edit the specific provision about parking because it's a non sequitur and how it got adopted at the end when it got drafted. It didn't come out right. So it is not meant to change this property in any way whatsoever.
if this development at a later time, if we approve this today and the council approves it later, if they were to come in and want to have some sort of commercial component, would they need to get staff and council approval again?
Yes, you would
or-
need
okay,
a new PUD plan approved, which has to come through the commission and the city
Okay.
council.
Got it.
So for all PUDs, what's proposed is what you get. If you want to do anything else for a use, you would have to come back through the approval process. It's not like regular zoning where you're going to get a full range of uses and never be back here to talk about it.
Would that be either a minor or major amendment then to whatever?
Minor is just for site plan issues. Minor changes to the site, not uses.
Oh, okay.
So it'd probably actually be a full rezoning to change the master plan of the site
Gotcha.
if you wanted to add a use that wasn't allowed. So when we approve when this gets approved in the contract rezoning, it's describing the use of the site as allowing for 145 units to be used for household living and not required to be used for senior living. That's how the contract is drafted right now.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions I had.
Okay, discussion between council and commission members.
I guess my only concern is the parking situation. Should the ownership of the lots for some reason in the future happen to split, just knowing, kind of looking even at the parking area on lot 1 versus lot 2, I'd have some concerns about that. So I guess to kind of support this, I do think, again, I definitely support the idea. I definitely think it's, low and moderate income housing is definitely needed in this community. But I would definitely want to add on the need for approval of a shared parking agreement between lots 1 and 2 of some sort, so that, again, they have by right, lot 1 has the ability to use the parking on lot 2 and vice versa.
Is that something that we can ask for in the PUD overlay at this juncture, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think you would just add it to any motion about recommending approval. You would want to, you recommend approval subject to
This and
either,
Okay.
the condition of I think you're saying subject to the approval of a
a shared
shared
parking agreement.
parking
between
arrangement or
lots,
something. Yeah.
yeah. Okay, we can have that.
I guess I'm concerned about, just because this thing is out of compliance right now, we're being asked to make an allowance for it, where we should be asking for enforcement of it, how it's zoned in the first place. Now they're coming in to ask for, and I know variance is not the proper wording, but
They're asking for relief. Yeah.
Relief,
From the
yes,
original
relief.
approval. Yeah.
yes.
No doubt.
And
I mean, I would say this. So maybe 3-4 weeks ago, I don't think she would mind me telling this. Jody Stumble was in my office. I don't know if you guys, Jody is the executive director for the Bridge Home, a nonprofit here in Ames, and they focus on low to moderate income housing, keeping people in their houses, housing people that have lost their houses. She was really lamenting the fact that the ZBA denied this because it was going to, in effect, displace several low to moderate income people that were already living here. So
I guess personally, just based on the market analysis that was done and kind of an understanding of the need for specific types of housing right now in this community, I I definitely understand your
Yep.
concern in terms of like, why should we allow this change? But at the same time, based on essentially what staff has outlined and essentially the purpose of a PUD overlay district, I feel like this is a perfect opportunity to kind of extend, this overlay zone for this particular property, given what it could do.
Yep.
And the need.
And I
that the
agree. And
community has.
they tried senior living. It didn't work.
From my past votes and comments on this commission, everybody should know that I am for affordable housing in Ames. We don't have nearly enough of it. But just because we don't have nearly enough of it, now we need to change zoning just because it's been that way for 15 years. If I built an extra garage on my property and you didn't find out about it for 15 years, would that make it okay?
Nope, but you'd probably go to city council and ask for the rules to change,
And if
which
they-
is exactly what we just
denied-
voted
and if
on
they-
last meeting.
And if they denied it,
We'd enforce on it. I mean, you're,
I
not gonna argue-
I
I'm
really
not
have a
gonna-
problem with not,
I mean,
with us
staff
not
has the
enforcing
same
it.
perspective. The
No.
PUD should never be viewed as a variance tool. It should be because we're getting something we want as a community
Mhm.
with the project we would not otherwise get.
And I think the 30
So if we
years is
deny it,
important.
we will go down the path to get to senior housing on that lot, but it will not be affordable. It will not necessarily be affordable. That's the trade-off.
say that again.
If this is denied, we will go down the path of getting that to be in compliance with its special use permit. Whichever households have to be displaced to come into compliance with the law. They will be required to be senior eligible, may or may not be affordable units. They'll be occupied with seniors eventually. It wouldn't happen in one day. That was one of the issues at the variance was, we're not kicking people out in one
No,
day. We're
I
not
wouldn't
going to
think
do
the city
that.
would do that.
It would be over some allowed time period. PUD should not be viewed as a get out of jail free card. And that is not how staff views this. We are definitely looking at it from our consolidated plan on housing needs, that we're finding value in the 30-year commitment to affordable housing rather than market level senior housing. That's really what we're looking at it as.
I had one question that I forgot to ask earlier. And is there anything that would happen if they sold the property as far as LIHTC, or is that in place for 30 years regardless? And she said 15 years and then an extension.
Yeah,
So
so
does
that
it end at 15?
not exactly. So
That's why I'm sorry. I just need the clarification.
yeah, and again, I'm not the expert on LIHTC. So effectively, there's two different monitoring periods, and it's combined 30 years. You can't just get out of it. The tax credits don't last for 30 years. They're for a defined amount of money.
Yeah.
You have to keep operating for 30 years, or you're subject to penalties and other things. So,
So they would have to run it for 30 years.
well, they could sell it, but whoever bought it's going to inherit that, which is
That's
called the
what I
LURA,
Yeah.
the land use restrictions. So they inherited that from buying it from the last property owner.
And the next one would have to
Would have the
follow
same thing.
LIHTC. That's what
And regardless of LIHTC, this is a city decision.
Mhm.
The contract rezoning is recorded against the property. So regardless of their IFA compliance or their IRS compliance, they're obligated to the city to do that. It's recorded against the property. Whoever takes title, it'll be in their abstract, and they'll be aware of that because it'll be recorded with the property.
Yeah, thank you. That answers that.
And I don't know, again, I'm not an expert on LIHTC either, very peripheral knowledge, but it may be 15 years and then you could get another 15 years. Or I think if you wanted to, you probably could get out of 15. But which again, I think what comes into play here, like you mentioned, this would go with a zoning. It would be a zoning agreement the city would end up guiding what that timeline needs to be. If we wanted to write in the zoning agreement that it needs to be 30-year of affordable units, I believe we can
You
ask for that in the agreement.
That's what it says.
Right. So
Because of the,
I think, I agree. I see where John is coming from on this one. And that was sort of my initial concern when we started this discussion. was this whole enforcement mechanism. And I think we need to just recognize that and keep it on our radar, that is something that I get it, that it's a complaint driven and it's a reactive process of enforcement. But given that the city is allowing for an intensified unit use in an apartment dwelling based on that FSRM for senior housing living, you get an additional sort of units. I think that's just something I would like us as a city to keep on a radar of how we look at these issues, if at all, in the future. That's just to keep on the radar. Going back to this one, I think, again, keeping everything that's happened since 2002, since this was first approved aside, keeping that sort of anecdotal and some of that study thing aside, what I do like about this proposal now is the fact that it's going to an affordable, formalizing that affordable housing development or preservation, if you want to say it, in this two-lot area. It's always difficult. Most cities are always trying to figure out how do we preserve our existing housing, existing affordable housing once it sort of goes out of that timeline of different programs that it is in. So the fact that you're going in again to try and make this a LIHTC model, use the LIHTC model for these to keep it affordable for 30 years, I think that is a very big positive for this project. We've also understood that senior housing does not seem to be a big issue based on the other studies that the city is doing. So it's not that the loss of these 61 units for senior units would create a big gaping hole elsewhere.
But how about affordable senior housing?
The whole thing is going to be now affordable based on that 60% AMI. So to me, that opens up, that still keeps it fair, and it still continues to be affordable. It's just that it's not senior only, and we have identified that senior housing is not an issue right now from the other studies.
Through their market reports.
So
And also
not
the
through-
city's CDPG
And the city.
studying and
So
reporting that they've
my housing coordinator does not disagree with the conclusions of the market assessment about the need or the availability of senior housing. Because we made this choice last year as the city. We could have put in a LIHTC application for a senior project because they're judged differently than household living projects. We as city staff advocated to city council that it was not the need in the community for us to put a senior project on the state street or the site. We definitely believe there's a greater need, and she did agree with the conclusions about availability of the senior units in the marketplace right now. So she didn't disagree with their assessment from this summer.
Yeah, I think based on all of that, I would be supportive of going with the alternative one with the two additions. One was what you suggested, Ruth,
Yeah, with the
was to
shared
have a shared parking arrangement. And then two, right now it just says as affordable housing with the PUD overlay. I would just write in a 30-year affordable. I would just put in that 30-year timeline in it, just so that that's sort of stated.
And will the city have some kind of enforcement for this? Or is it just going to go 15 years?
So it's an annual.
They
It's
have
an
to
annual
provide all that
reporting to the
reporting.
city and IFA.
So if they don't submit the report, they'll be inconsistent
And to
with
the
the
city.
agreement. Then they're subject to penalties for non-compliance with the agreement. That's the structure of it as drafted right now by the city attorney.
And then getting back to our conversation, and it's whoever that woman was that you said,
Jody.
Jody.
Jody. Okay, I thought it was. They have a real concern about low income not being enough of it. Well, I know that there's not enough in Ames. I know that for a fact. But she is concerned about the displacement of the property that isn't in compliance.
Yes.
It's really hard for me to.
I mean, the property isn't operating the way it's
Supposed to.
it's zoned to, but it's meeting a need in the city. That's
And I'd like to add, it's not the new owners who we would be having an issue with as to whether it was in compliance or not in compliance, because it was the previous owner who got it zoned this way and did all of that. So we definitely want to get it into some kind of compliance.
Would get it into compliance no matter what, because the city now knows that there's a problem.
Yeah,
So that they're obligated to correct the problem.
Yeah,
and this is how they're doing it.
Right.
He
There's
said
different
that
ways to
It's not,
correct
it's not how we're
Right.
doing it. It's how, to be clear, it's not how we're doing it. We've given them a couple of options. So from the time they brought that form that she referenced to us, we have been pushing, saying, you're out of compliance. You need to either come into compliance or seek relief. Variance was not acceptable. I mean, this mechanism here didn't exist until 4 months ago. It wasn't even an option on the table because we didn't have a PUD overlay until this summer. So when we first started talking to them, they didn't really have options, and we were investigating how they could get to compliance. And then they've chosen to put this option on the table rather than try to undo their IFA agreements and come into zoning compliance.
And you said it's only been recently that you did that have the PUD as an option, and it's not something that is easily, gotten by just anyone or any situation, correct?
I mean, it's a rezoning application. It's discretionary. You have to advocate for why you're not going to comply with basic requirements.
Gotcha.
What's the trade-off for that? And it's embedded in that PUD that we acknowledge affordable housing. I hope we use it more. I think this one reason why we did this PUD overlay was to let affordable housing be easier to build. That's why we built the parking reduction, and it's an unnecessary impediment in a true affordable housing project compared to market rate student housing.
If we approve this, is this going to open the door for others?
I mean, we have a low to moderate income affordable housing issue, so.
Again, I'll take any call from a LIHTC developer that wants to build affordable housing in the city and explain how to do it. So that's not a problem for me.
What I'm talking about is for taking away senior living.
It's
Sure.
extremely unique. Most market rate properties are not trying to get into LIHTC. If you've already got your project financed and built, you're not trying to go back and reduce rents. This is a unique situation. I think new projects could come in and ask for the relief to get affordable housing built. I don't see any market properties trying to drop down to affordable levels. I think so. What would be the real kind of a twist on your question, John, would be those properties I told you about with the co-ops. They're not affordable. They're just senior living.
I realize that.
So if
Senior living is not necessarily affordable.
definitely isn't. So how could they ever take one of those 50 unit buildings and come to us and say, I want to just be able to have anybody live in it? There would be no justification. There's no special issue to address. It's only because this is going to affordable housing that this has any justification under the PUD. So I don't think it opens the door to anybody else, because what's their argument? There's none. It's just, I want to do something different than I'm allowed to do. And they're not trading anything for that. They're not giving the community anything to get that benefit. This project is at least 30 years of affordability.
So if I get that right, the other two or any other apartment units that are approved under that senior housing, they cannot come in and ask for a PUD change?
They could, but they would have no justification for it. I can't say no to applying. I can say I'm not going to recommend approval because you've not addressed the
So
principles.
they would
in
not
it.
meet the requirements of what that PUD.
I don't know how they would address it. I guess if they came in and said, I'm going to give you a real great amenity package, build all these recreation facilities that I wouldn't otherwise do if you let me not be senior housing, maybe the city buys that. But you got to give something to get that relief. It's not a backdoor from the building size limitation.
So that's what attachment G essentially kind of outlines, right, Kelly?
Yeah.
Is like essentially, in order for you to be allowed the flexibility of the overlay district, you have to give something in return. In this case, the site is agreeing to a 30-year affordable housing
So I like the precedent of tonight that for someone to actually ask for relief and say, I'm going to give you affordable housing, the precedent is at 60% AMI for 30 years is where we start the conversation. Because the code doesn't actually define what affordable housing is. Is it 80% of AMI? I hope not. Maybe it is. I don't know.
So you'd be willing to back one with a news and Ruth's addition.
Was there a motion?
No.
Not yet.
Okay.
It's called a discussion still.
Yeah, I mean, I would, because I think the parking suggestion's a good one.
I agree too.
We're not always on the same side of the arguments all the time, and I'm.
Okay, I'm gonna work on putting this motion together then.
That, well,
Work it.
are we done discussing?
Unless anyone else has anything to add.
Okay, at this time,
I was gonna say,
I'll entertain a motion.
I would move that the Plan and Zoning Commission may recommend that the City Council approve the request for rezoning from FSRM Suburban Residential Medium Density to FSRM PUD Suburban Residential Medium Density Planned Unit Development. Based upon staff's findings and conclusions as found in the addendum and subject to a zoning agreement for use of the site as affordable housing for a minimum of 30 years. And approval of a shared parking agreement between lots 1 and 2 with the PUD overlay.
I will second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, say nay. So approved.
Nice job.
So this item will move on to city council next Tuesday with your recommendation.
Okay, item number 7, zoning text amendment to add commercial use to planned unit development PUD.
So Benjamin's going to present this item.
What's that? This is the one that's coming up.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you not get your packet today?
Good evening. This text amendment is regarding changes to the planned unit development overlay district, which you have all just discussed at length. And some different aspects of it, though. To give a brief background, in June of this year, the City Council directed staff to respond to a memo from Steve Bergeson, who is here tonight, of Ansley Development Group, asking the council to consider expanding the limited commercial uses in the FPRD Floating Plan Residence District that serves customers from outside of a PRD development. The requester believes that allowing for additional commercial use will serve the residents of the future Ansley neighborhood, along with bicyclists, runners, walkers on the adjacent Tedesco bike trail. And as you can see on the map here, and I realized as I was preparing earlier that I didn't outline the district, but you can see that roughly these parcels here and then down to the corner here are these parcels are what Ansley will be. And this is the location here of the proposed commercial site. And then the blue is the Tedesco bike trail that was just completed. So the conceptual plan for Ansley includes over 200 housing units of various types and a small commercial component. The applicant desires to have no more than 18,000 square feet of commercial use. The applicant views the commercial as neighborhood in scale, even if the uses are not typically neighborhood. The applicant also finds it to be a marketable piece of the development overall, more so than trying to establish a commercial node or a district. And Mr. Bergeson has stated that he intends for the commercial building to be 2-story and to be used as a combination of a small event center, less than 100 people, a food commissary for the event center, which would also serve as a kind of pit stop for people using the trail, and for local deliverable food product, and a sales office and design office for Ansley for the development. After discussing the request and options provided by staff, council gave direction in August of this year to proceed with changes to the planned unit development overlay standards instead of the PRD standards. Council was concerned with changes that could affect previous PRDs as opposed to modifying the newly adopted PUD. There aren't currently no PUDs that have been adopted. Council directed staff to set a limit of up to 35,000 square feet of floor area within a PUD based upon the intent for such, with the intent that they would be smaller in scale, the commercial component. And I'll discuss where we arrived at that 35,000 square foot number. The land use policy plan has several stated goals, including that development be environmentally friendly and that it create a greater sense of place and connectivity physically and psychologically. One of the objectives for that second goal is to include creating more integrated and compact living areas where daily living requirements and amenities are provided in a readily identifiable and accessible area. And the LUPP also identifies several types of commercial development, including what the plan calls convenience commercial nodes, which are defined as, this is in new growth areas, this would be, so undeveloped land, greenfield sites. Convenience commercial is intended to be between 2 and 5 acres and no greater than 100,000 square feet of total floor area, no more than 35,000 square feet in any single building, which is where we arrived at the 35,000 number. This is a summary of the proposed text changes that are scattered throughout the ordinance. And this is in order as they appear. Going through them briefly, the first change is to just give a means of establishing a district. The second change is what the permitted land uses are. So this section already exists. The underline is the new language that is proposed. Creating a standards table, including the maximum size of 35,000, and then listing the allowable uses. And then this fourth change has to do with a correction to an error that we discovered in the text, which you discussed earlier in the previous PUD. And then the last change is creating some basic compatibility standards. The PUD zoning is discretionary, as is all zoning, and not every district will be required to have a commercial component, and those that do will be subject to council approval, as well the entire district. As such, staff does not anticipate a negative impact on future residential development. The changes are intended to mirror the scale and intended the scale intended within PRDs that do not rise to the level of commercial nodes and the need for commercial zoning. The proposed changes address the ability of a PUD to be more flexible in design, and the changes do not alter the fact that the PUD overlays are to be primarily residential. New language should help allow for limited commercial development, which will complement proposed neighborhoods, and staff therefore recommends alternative 1, which is to recommend that the council approve the PUD standards as proposed.
Okay. Any questions of the staff? This, what's being proposed is just neighborhood grocery stores, or what we used to have all over Graves.
So I did include at the end of the attachment D has all of the permissible uses that are allowed in entertainment, restaurant, and recreation trade, and retail sales and services. In retail sales and services, there are subcategories, including automotive and marine craft trade, which we are not including, and then we are not including wholesale trade. But the other two subcategories, the entertainment, restaurant, and recreation, and retail sales and services general. All of those
Bars.
uses are what are the proposed allowable uses.
Bars are an approved use.
Yes.
So Benjamin, can you clarify?
Mhm.
So essentially with this, I mean, the existing property as it is zoned FPRD essentially. So if this were approved, the applicant could potentially seek essentially rezoning for the property that they're looking to have that overlay added.
Well, it's the property is actually zoned agricultural right now.
Okay.
The FPRD comes in because we met with the applicant earlier in the year, and
I see.
out of our
Okay.
discussion, we recommended that he pursue a text amendment change in FPRD. And we took it to council, and we gave council several options, one of which was to, instead of amending FPRD, was to amend the PUD, and council chose to amend the PUD instead of FPRD.
Okay. So it's currently the entire area right now is just zoned agricultural.
Correct.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, that helps. I was a little unsure of kind of the existing situation there. So on page 8, it says for this particular, I guess, section of code that the property on which the PUD is requested has a residential zoning of RL, RM, UCRM, RH, FSRL, FSRM, blah, blah, blah. So if, for instance, the applicant wanted to rezone the majority of the property to FPRD, but then do the overlay, would they be allowed to do that?
No, that'd be redundant.
Right.
So
So they would look to rezone to essentially one of those other zoning districts that then they would be eligible for the overlay.
correct. So all likelihood they'd propose FSRL
Okay.
with a PUD overlay. You wouldn't mix a PRD with a PUD. 'Cause
Right,
They're trying to
I
accomplish
just
the
wanted-
same thing, but with different expectations.
Right.
That sounds like an
Again,
administrative
just
nightmare.
because that particular, got thrown around on that first page, I was like, I always want to be clear what's allowed, what's okay.
Yeah, we put that in there just because that was the original
Right,
intent, and then
Okay.
council gave different direction.
And I
Mhm.
think we said it in the report. I think the reason council said do the PUD is we don't have any yet, versus there are PRDs
Mhm.
all over town, and they didn't
Right.
want to like set artificial expectations that you could
Right.
change what you've been doing and do
Mhm.
something else.
Right. No, I completely understand. I just wanted to make sure I got that cleared up. Okay. Thank you.
This won't change the setbacks and parking and all of the other rules that we always end up dealing with, will it?
Correct. And any other standards would still apply.
Land.
Not really. So the PUD is intended to not meet setbacks, right?
Mhm.
The only parking reduction you can get is for affordable housing. That's the only parking reduction that's allowed, but the PUD itself is meant to allow for flexibility in lot size, building height, setbacks, except at the perimeter of a site.
Mhm.
So parking, no. Setbacks, yes.
So Kelly, then would they be expected, just like kind of the discussion we had with the previous project, they'd be expected to have some sort of additional kind of design standards built in with asking for the overlay? Would
Yeah.
that
So
be-
since we haven't done one yet,
Right.
that didn't already have the buildings built.
Technical.
The thought process was there's kind of two different routes you can go. As part of the application process, you're supposed to articulate what you're trying to do as a vision for your project. And we can ask for architectural information to understand what character you're going for, why maybe the reduced setbacks are okay if that's what you're requesting.
Okay.
And that can be either approved as a master plan without real specific buildings, or if you were doing an apartment project that's PUD, you'll probably come in with a major site plan that's the approvable plan with real specific building elevations. So it's you can kind of come in with a pattern book or a character example for a single family project, but an apartment multifamily is probably going to have real specific site plans, or in this case, a commercial would need a real
Right,
specific
yeah.
site plan.
Okay. So then staff would potentially be looking for them to meet the purpose of.
So so
overlay.
if whenever the first one comes in, there's at least 3 circling around out there. I think you're going to see one within the next 6 weeks. So you'll see how that comes in. Here's the proposal. It's a site plan. Here's maybe really specific architecture, or maybe just this is the character we're going for. And then that'll be either in a master plan approval or a formal site plan approval, one or the other.
Okay.
And then you can either, so single family homes don't normally go even to staff for review, but you can delegate some review to staff for design consistency, or council could hold that back and say it does have to come through council for larger buildings or for apartments or commercial buildings. So
Okay.
it kind of depends. The more you give us up front, less likely you have to come back. You don't give us very much up front, you probably got to come back.
Got it.
So this area will have to come back to us?
It hasn't come to you yet at all.
Yeah, this.
Okay.
Well, so Benjamin's
Yes,
just
you're
trying
right.
to give you,
Right.
because of one specific property is motivated to address the issue, he wanted to give you some context to how it would work on a site. I mean, it's going to be a citywide amendment. Anybody could use it.
So
We
this
know a
will
lot
come
of,
to us.
Shouldn't
It
say
will.
the applicant per se then.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So there is
I
no,
take that
there
back.
is no applicant
No.
for this.
The
This is just
council.
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
just city
the
staff.
Yes.
the city chose to be so city council chose to be the applicant because they thought it was of citywide applicability.
Okay.
Yes, sorry.
I haven't, I'm not really from Ames, like I haven't been here very long. So I'm not sure where this is located. I just want to have context for my brain, like,
South of
Yeah.
Research.
Down,
Yeah.
well,
you know where
right?
University Drive is? You know where the 2 roundabouts are down south?
Oh,
Where
yeah.
the
mhm.
McFarland Clinic.
Yeah, I know where that is. Okay.
Okay, it's straight
See
west,
the
east,
roundabout.
west of there.
Okay, I'm with you.
Right
I'm
up in
just
the
a little
corner.
lost as to where we're talking about.
It's a
Sorry.
beautiful trail.
No,
You should
that's
get out
South for
there.
Ames Rapids.
No, I know where it is. I just didn't, like, it was not registering that was.
Yeah.
You know, that's, yeah. I don't know street names, people.
I think personally it's a great idea because from what I'm reading, I think the step up, the next option is to have a convenience, what is it called? Convenience commercial node or commercial convenience node, which is a bigger footprint, 100,000 square feet. So I think this is a great option to have that sort of smaller scaled neighborhood catering to sort of neighborhood node sort of thing. And at the same time, if you start applying this allowance or this PUD thing to sites like this, it will end up serving a much bigger population. I think it's a brilliant idea. So I'm totally for the PUD text change, and I'm really looking forward to that coming through.
Well, I think it can be an item to pull a neighborhood together. You know, because Ames used to have little grocery stores all over Ames. There used to be one right across the street from just north of McFarland Clinic. And, you know, this is out in the middle of nowhere, really. So I can see where it could fulfill a need, and the trail being added to it. Another way to get visitors to Ames also.
Well, and kind of strategically along the trail, I think is great. And if this is correct and it says location of commercial site, it's not like, you know, again, this shouldn't be site specific because this is
Right.
general change. But yeah, I think in certain instances it can make a lot of sense. So hopefully that in terms of how it's applied, it'll be applied in situations like this that do seem appropriate. I guess my only concern would be if something like this was allowed, is there a method, say, for certain types of uses that are going to be allowed? Like if, for instance, they have outdoor seating, are they required to have any sort of special use permit or anything like that? Should they do alcohol sales or have amplified sound? Is there anything like that with the city of Ames that's required for
So
again, outdoor seating areas or anything like that?
The zoning ordinance does not regulate alcohol sales individually from being a bar, being a restaurant, being a general retail store. So it's embedded in that list that Benjamin has up. Alcohol sales is permissible. Outdoor seating is a site plan issue. How much impervious area are you proposing in terms of an outdoor seating area? That's the only thing. We don't have a regulation that says you can or can't have it. It's just a part of a site plan review.
Okay, so there's no
Amplify.
restrictions or like they don't have to go if say they're within like 500 feet of a residentially zoned area, or residentially used area, they don't have to like request a special use permit to,
No, we don't have anything like that.
okay,
And then in terms of noise, we have a municipal code
Right.
standard for noise or amplified sound that's not in the zoning ordinance.
okay. I was just curious.
Yeah.
it's
So
P-
some cities do all of those things. We don't.
Right. No, well, that's why I was asking because, excuse me, the city of Ankeny does. And so I didn't know, especially in this particular situation where you're looking to include several of these uses that, you know, might have outdoor seating close to then residential.
So that's where I
Is that-
think that's where the site plan component of the PUD is going to come in. Those are the things you would ask, you know, if there's no outdoor seating area shown, it's not allowed. It has to be shown on the plan.
Right.
So if they expect to have, you know, if it's a restaurant or a bar that's shown on the plan, you should assume there's potentially entertainment on Saturday night or whenever. Alcohol sales will be permitted. Those things are all assumed in any proposal for a bar or restaurant.
Right. But I'm, again, in terms of a mechanism for the city to have a way of saying like, okay, is this going to create a problem, I guess? And so that's it, because again, we're looking in this case about in particular, adding this piece that these uses are going to be in close proximity, probably to a large
But
number.
they're only going to be allowed if a site plan is approved to allow for them.
Right,
that
but
means
wouldn't
it's
that
gonna
site
be-
plan potentially abut another existing residential area?
It definitely could.
So that's what I'm wondering is, again, like you could have existing residential, you could approve a site plan that would then allow for these uses, potentially outdoor seating, outdoor sound, outdoor drinking, and those existing residences could then, their environment could be changed then by this, essentially this code modification. So that's why if there's no mechanism for them to seek like a special use permit for outdoor seating, I guess by right, then, you know, you're including these uses that could then create some,
So it's not exactly by right though.
Well,
So I wouldn't
right,
classify
they
this as
would
by
have
right
to
because it's
still-
completely discretionary
right,
to allow for it. It's an option that you can propose, discretionary to approve, but it's at the PUD
True.
level rather than with some subsequent permit down the road.
right. So if there is existing residential and they rezone with the overlay, obviously existing properties should get notice of
They'll definitely
that,
get
so-
noticed, and the site plan would be the component to say, oh, geez, really, we're going to put a patio for 200
Right.
people 5 feet from their backyard. I mean, that's the thing that you'd have to review as the
Right.
board and the council.
Okay, I see.
It can't get snuck in at a later date if that's the concern is, oh, we approved a restaurant, we didn't know there was a patio for 200 people on the side. That wouldn't be allowed.
So they wouldn't be allowed to make that addition after the fact.
Correct. That would not be a minor change.
And at least the sound part of it could be regulated because there's a sound ordinance. So it could be a
Mhm.
complaint driven if
Right.
someone complains it's too loud or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, we don't have, just to be fair though, we don't have any hours of operation limits on any commercial district in the city. Like we don't. It's
But
just-
in the noise ordinance, there is like, if I remember, a 10 PM.
there is a standard at, I think it's 10 PM where you need to be under that number.
Right.
But like for example, let's just take Wallabies. They have houses right across the street from a second level bar. That's whether that ever gets over the decibel level or not, I don't know. But there's activity for many hours into the night, and they don't have to shut down at any particular hour just because they're next to residential.
Right, but that Wallabies definitely existed after the residential. So
Correct.
residents in that neighborhood, you know,
The same with like the Casey's on Bloomington, right? They can operate 24 hours a day, regardless of there being single family homes across the street. We do not have hours of operation limitations in any zone, commercial zone we have in the city.
But this PUD would only be for less than 3,500 feet.
35,000 square feet.
35,000 square feet.
Up to, right? Again, all discretionary. Too much, you can cut it down, pare it down, not allow outdoor uses if you think that's a compatibility issue in the future. It's all about the site. It's all about context. It's all going to be decided with each specific proposal.
So that we could reduce it in size.
You can, yeah, so you can deny or condition, yes.
But that would be on a PUD basis.
Right.
You're not making that change here
Right.
because as the recommendation, the second paragraph says it would be subject to council approval.
Okay,
So that's kind of where it
Right.
gets addressed.
that addresses my issue, yes. Anybody else have any questions of staff? Since the staff is the applicant, now we'll,
I just want to highlight that we mentioned this before. We had a mistake in how that parking reduction was worded when we first approved it. It didn't make any sense. 2 spaces per building. It was not really the intent. So
no,
that's getting fixed here. Yes. That was quite a reduction, right?
Why not?
I'm gonna put in all the bike parking.
okay, any members of the audience would like to come forward, offer comments and questions on this item? Please introduce yourself and oh, you have it already. No, you need to fill out the form that's,
Okay, excuse me.
because otherwise the boss gets mad here. Oops. Do you want me to sign my copy? I didn't know if you had a copy there or not. Never mind.
So my name's Steve Bergeson. My address is 3314 Cedar Lane. In that area we live, and that's my wife and daughter. This has been fascinating. We've never been to a planning and zoning meeting. We're so excited about the concept behind the development, and with smaller lot sizes and neighborhood, pocket neighborhood homes, a place like this becomes really servicing the area, because people aren't going to have huge yards to have tent meetings for their relatives. And so this small event center becomes a place. And we're trying to figure out ways to just build community in the area with cooking classes, and there'll be live workspaces where there could be someone that's a photographer having a studio on the bottom floor and live on the top floor. But this could be used once a month to bring people into an opportunity to, buy their photography. And we're foodies. We love cooking classes. We love offering things that are going to bring people in to foster that community kind of experience. It's also transitional because this bike trail has opened it up, connecting it to the Heart of Iowa Trail and the Trestle Bridge Trail. I mean, literally, you can go all the way up to Gilbert, and from Gilbert go all the way over to the Trestle Bridge Trail. So we're getting traffic just coming through. And also because it's connected to the university and to the research park, it's been a collaborative effort with the county and Iowa State and the city of Ames with the Tedesco Learning Corridor. Well, this is just that extender trail that the county put in. And so we wanted to have something that could accommodate all the different activities going on, but while primarily serving the neighborhood. And so if I can answer any questions, I sure try.
You're looking like a coffee shop or
That would be my first
a little
choice.
grocery store.
I mean, as long as you can smell the coffee and drink the coffee, everything's good. So,
Or a little mini grocery store.
yeah, well,
But not gas.
no gas. No, we're that's down the road. But and being able to service the bike trail community, the coffee shop, when I think about, a small event center, where right now small event centers are really hard to find in Ames. And it would be primarily for our community there, but there's a whole apartment complex right next door that they don't have an event center like that. So we think it's going to draw from the area as well. But definitely coffee will be a foundational menu item.
Do you have a sense of timeline?
I'm sorry.
Do you have a sense of what your timeline looks like?
We're going to be hopefully starting phase 1 of the development this spring. And then this would fall into phase 2. And phase 1 has 30 building sites. And so if that all goes good, and we think it will, because we've had quite a bit of interest in the area, we'd start that in a couple years is the idea behind it, the phase 2 part.
So the coffee shop is coming after 2 years then?
Well, we have that just down at the filling station, but yeah.
So this is going to be part of that housing development that's northwest of it?
No.
Is that the EPCON that you're referring
Yes.
to? It's not a part of it.
Okay.
It'll be right next door, part of the neighborhood. And so, it'll be open again to the public as well as,
Not just access from the north, but from the west too?
yeah, the access from the west. So, yeah, like the Ringenberg Park area, or it's fascinating how many families are just walking their dogs and walking to the bike path. Like the bike path has become an attraction for Ringenberg Park
Right.
families coming over. So I think it'll draw from that area. We're hoping that it will. So
Any other questions of the public?
so thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay. Any other? Okay. Public comment is now closed. Staff, and who is the applicant? Any more comments?
Nope.
Commission discussion?
Nope.
Seeing none, move on to entertaining motions.
I can make the motion. Recommend alternative 1, that city council modify PUD standards by allowing for a small commercial component to districts as presented in attachment C.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. We get applause, which is rare.
Doesn't happen very often.
Okay. Commission comments about the meeting. The only thing I have is I'd like to see some kind of enforcement device so we don't run into item number 7 again, or 6. Excuse me, not 7.
Six.
I don't. City council tells inspections division how to operate. I do not.
You do not, but you can pass on comments from the commission
I do
to
not
the city
pass
council.
on, I do not pass on comments at board meetings. Sorry. I mean, these are they're comments. They're not directions to staff. So they have no bearing on what city council does.
Oh,
Maybe we could go to city council meetings.
Yes, go to
and
city
That's a different thing. Yes.
as part of the community or whatever.
you'd be-
We'll just send them an email.
Okay,
As a concerned citizen.
yes.
Or as a concerned
I
commission
just
member,
find
either way,
it,
yeah.
problematic that there's no way to enforce it.
It seems odd that you would
Rezoning.
have them seek a special use permit and then, there's,
A year later, they're not using it that way. at the beginning.
Well, I mean, it was many years old, but yeah.
No, I meant at the time they applied in 2002 and then 2003 on, they were not.
I don't want to go
Like
down that
behind
path
it.
again. Can we adjourn the meeting if you're going to have this discussion so I can go home?
Yeah.
Okay.
It has been a long day.
Just again, December 1st, please have a quorum, please, all 6 of you. Ames Plan 2040.
Or 5, like 5 would.
Well, like I want as many. I need 4 votes to do something, whatever it is. So yeah, we'll have a meeting on the 1st, and I probably have a meeting on the 15th as well. It looks like for other items.
Okay, that's the staff comments for tonight, right?
Yeah, that's the end of it.
Okay.
It was a good thing you mailed out the packets a day earlier. I just got mine today.
So did I.
So did I.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Friday
I
morning.
got mine today.
You never did get
And-
yours.
Well, I mean, it might be sitting in my mailbox because
Yeah.
I've been gone since 7 this morning. And I looked at everything online to look at it all. So,
So,
I mean, so
so
even though I
let's-
didn't remember specific percentages,
And there
But-
was
I
a,
had reviewed.
there
it.
was
Pretty
an
good,
issue
though.
with the address stickers.
Yeah.
Mine, just by luck, I had it.
So just
Mine-
as a
Mine came off in my hand.
as a quick question then before you adjourn. So obviously it's available on Friday and that's out there
Yeah.
online. I can't get it to you really any faster than you're getting. It's kind of depressing that you're not getting it till today. Do you still want them by mail?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
I
so you'd
prefer
rather
by
have it
mail
in
'cause it's-
in hand to bring it to the meeting at
Yeah.
least.
Yeah.
Because
Because we,
honestly, I don't know
Because
if
I
anybody
like
else
to be
even
able to
gets a
go
paper
through it and
copy
make
anymore
notations.
besides this commission. So no, I don't think any of the commissions we staff, council doesn't get it, HPC doesn't get it in paper
Is
necessarily.
it,
but-
actually, I have another idea. Is it possible to get the paper copies at the meeting? Can we review them electronically and then
Absolutely.
provide us the packets at the
Yep.
meeting?
Well,
Absolutely.
that's-
That'd be
that would
fine.
work because that's what
It's
I had
helpful to
sent
have in
today.
front of you.
I don't know.
I get it.
That
I
would
just
work
wondered
for
what
me.
you wanted us to
I
do
know,
with
and you
it.
like to take notes.
I
on
appreciate getting it, even if it comes Wednesday afternoon, because then I can write notes on it and it's
Right.
easy for me to follow.
Okay,
through.
That's true.
I'm not trying to take it away
Personally-
from you. I'm just wondering.
I can
how to
write
help.
notes on separate paper and I'm okay with that as long as I can have the packet at the meeting. So that.
So we won't change anything then. We'll just assume the mail's
Okay.
going to get it to
Okay.
you by Wednesday. If you don't get it before you come to the meeting or by Wednesday, let Natalie or Lori know and we'll print out a copy to put on
Okay.
the dais for you. So if you don't have it, let us know. We'll
Okay.
get you a copy.
I just, on some of the things we do, 40 pages.
I get it.
Well, that's, yeah, and I printed
I
the
get it.
last
Yes.
bit and it was fine, but.
Yeah, don't print it. Please don't print it.
Okay.
I'm a little old fashioned. I guess I like paper.
I like having it at the
Yes.
meeting so I can.
Oh, yeah.
5 days.
And it's okay to have like our laptops here, correct? At the
But,
meeting. to look
It is. The only thing I would advise is do not add information to the record of your own research at the meeting during the meeting. Like if you hear something, don't Google it and say, oh, now I understand this and add that to the record
No, I
yourself.
meant
Do
so
not.
that, like if we don't get the packet in.
You can,
time.
yes, if you want to bring an
My laptop's
iPad,
just in my car, but I didn't bring it up.
100%, bring an iPad, laptop. If you want to have it digitally on the table, no
Mhm.
problem with that. I
Okay,
was just saying,
gotcha.
don't use your device to add information to the record.
But that's
That's
what got
frowned
my
upon.
PhD with Google. So.
Just saying that's frowned upon. Yeah, the commission
Oh.
is not to add evidence to the record.
It may not be a true PhD then, is what you're saying?
Not saying anything about that.
I know a lot of times I go drive by the properties before we.
That's fine. That's maybe even expected. It's not bad to disclose that if it's a site-specific application, to say that I did visit the site, so everybody understands you might have viewed something or experienced something that no one else did, especially if that's going to influence your decision. I mean, we all live in Ames, so we drive by a lot of sites. So I'm not expecting you to be like, oh, wow, I drive by this every other day for the last 10 years. And this is my opinion. You don't have to just do that, but just kind of think about if you're making a decision based on something you experienced that no one else might have experienced or seen, you should disclose that so the applicant can respond or the public knows what you're doing or why you're doing that.
Okay.
That's
No,
that's
I'm-
just called, that's just helping the record be nice and clean and not look like you're biased.
Okay, from now on, I'll make sure I say I drove by this.
Again, I drive by all kinds of sites all the time. It's more like if there's something unique that you think you're making a decision based on what you experienced, not just the average. I drove by it
Yeah.
every day for the last 15 years.
60.
We start discussing the side over
Disclosure is
there.
always
It's right
fine.
outside the window.
Always err on the side of disclosure, so there's no implied bias that someone didn't know why you did what you did on a vote. And you're not making a final decision, so it's not as legalese as it is for other situations like the zoning board of adjustment or for city council, but disclosure is always good.
But that's why I brought forward that one time that guy came up to my house.
Well, that's I don't even know what that is. Yes, that's concerning.
Yes, it was. At this time, I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
Move adjournment.
Okay, we're adjourned.
Yeah.